Hey, this is Jerry from Bliz Studio, and in this particular demo, we're actually going to create a little collectible. Now you can use this for both 2D and 3D games, so it doesn't matter which type you're gonna use. So if you're ready to create this, let's go. Okay, so here we're in Unity, and what I wanna do is I wanna go ahead and put together this collectible that we can put in our game. Now the cool thing is that this will work for both 2D and 3D. So let's go ahead and get this started. So the first thing I'm gonna do is in Unity, in my scene, so I kind of have the base of the scene set up. I just had a plane that I applied a material to, and then I have a skybox, procedural skybox that I applied some color to. And so what I wanna do is I wanna go ahead and create a collectible that's in this space. Okay, so the first thing I'm gonna do is go ahead and create an empty game object. Now, the reason I'm creating an empty game object is so that I can have items inside of that. So I'm gonna go ahead and create this empty game object first. So let's go ahead and create an empty, and I'm gonna call this collectible. All right, so I have that. And inside of that, I'm gonna go ahead and create a 3D cube. Now the cool thing is that even though this is a 3D game object, it actually works for 2D as well. So you can use this technique for both. So what I'm gonna do is to have this be my collectible item. And then what I want to do is I want to go ahead and rotate this so it's kind of on the point of it, and so it looks more like a diamond in its shape. So let's go ahead and just rotate this. I'm going to go ahead and use my rotation tool. We'll go ahead and kind of rotate this so where it's kind of on its edge, and then maybe rotate it so it's something like this. Yeah, and I think that works pretty good. So what I'm going to do is I'm also going to take this and just move this over slightly so it's a little more centered in my scene. And I'm going to go ahead and just take my collectible item and change the scale of it just a little bit because I think it's a little on the big side. So let's take this down to 0.5 by 0.5 by 0.5. And I think that works just a little bit better. Okay, so I want to go ahead and create a material for this. So first I'm going to go into my materials folder. I'm going to go ahead and create a new material, and we'll call this collectible. All right. And I'm going to take that material and just drag it right onto my cube. Okay. So we have that set up, but I really don't have anything applied to the material. So again, depending on what you want this collectible to look like, you can change a lot of different things with the material. But what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and go over into Photoshop. And I want to create this so it has a particular look to it. So I kind of want the edges to be a little more light, and then on the inside, a little more dark and a little more saturated. So I'm gonna have this be kind of like a yellow, kind of gold color. And so what I'm gonna do is just go ahead and grab my fill and choose kind of a yellow color here real quick. And I think that looks good, kind of a goldy color. And then I'm gonna go ahead and just add a new layer just so I can have this to fall back on if I need to. I'm gonna go ahead and, let's see, I'm just gonna use my brush. Something like that looks good. And let's go ahead and take this more on the orangey red side. And something like that, maybe go in just a little bit more, push that even on the more red side. So it kind of has a really nice kind of gradated look to it. Okay, so we have that set up. I'm gonna go ahead and save this out real quick. And so let's save this. Okay, so I saved that out. So let's go back to Unity real quick. And I can take the sprite that I just created. So let's go ahead and collectible face. I want to make sure this is a 2D UI, which I think is fine. We'll go ahead and click apply. And then what I'm going to do is with the material, so my collectible material, we see we have a base map. This is where I'm going to apply that graphic. Okay, so let's go back to our collectible. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this, I'm going to drag it right in the little box to the left of the word base map. Okay, so now you can see that our cube has changed. It's got this nice little red color in the middle and it's kind of yellowy on the outside. Now I can influence the color and determine how I want this to look, which is kind of cool. So I can, make this more red or less red. I can change kind of some of the color aspects of this, and which is really gives me some options. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is that I want the red color part to look like it's indented. Okay, so this has some kind of physical shape to it, even though it's a box. So the cool thing that we can do is we can apply a normal map. Okay, so how do we create that? There's a lot of different ways. There's a lot of different tools that are out there. So I'm going to go back into Photoshop real quick, and I'm just going to take this yellow color here. And what we're going to do is change this from black to white, okay? Or change it to black and white. So I'm going to have the white is where the highest points are going to be in the graphic, and then whatever's dark or black is going to be the lowest points in the graphic, okay? So let's go ahead and just fill this with white first. So let's do just a fill. So the background is now white. I'm going to go ahead and just take this layer that has this red on it. I'm going to go ahead and just desaturate that. So I'll just take the saturation down so it makes it kind of gray. So we'll go ahead and do that. And then I'm also going to go ahead and just use my brush again to kind of paint in dark in the middle, okay? So wherever's the darkest is going to be kind of inset into the graphic. All right, so I think that looks pretty good. I might just take this down in size just a little bit. So it gives me a little more of the edge as a solid color. Now we've got just a little bit of a line right there, but I think that actually works out pretty good. So let's go ahead and save this as a separate image. So we'll go ahead and call this collectible height. All right. Now what we're going to do again is I said I need this as a normal map. So there's some really great tools that are out there. I've got some software that allows me to accomplish that, but there's also some free tools there too. So Normal Map Online is one of those. You can find that. And the cool thing is all you need to do is just drag that gray image into this spot. So let's go ahead and just do that real quick. So I'm just going to drag that in, drop it. And now you can see that we look like we have an actual 3D shape, even though the face of that is flat. So that's the advantage of using a normal map. Now, the cool thing is we've got some options here. We can choose how sharp that is. If it's super sharp, so we can have some like texture to it, or if it's a little more smooth and what that looks like. And there's you can create some really cool effects. What the depth of this is, and then the strength as well, which will create more of a higher indent. So this kind of looks pretty cool. So let's go ahead and actually I'm going to take the blurriness down just because I want that boxy edge to it. So let's go ahead and just call that good. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to download my normal map here as a PNG. So I'm going to download that. So I'm going to allow that to be downloaded. I'm going to drop that into my Unity project. So I'm going to bring that over into my sprites. So my collectible normal map. And the other thing that I want to do is the texture type. I want this to be a normal map type texture. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and click apply. And then let's just go ahead and zoom in on this graphic real quick, just so we can see a little better what's happening. With the collectible material, you can see that we've got an option here for normal map. So I'm going to just drag that right into my normal map. And now you can see that we've got that kind of 3D effect added to our graphic. So that looks pretty cool. And so what we want to do is to have this object have some glow to it, okay? So what we're going to do is apply an emission. An emission means it's emitting kind of light. So we can look here at the emission map and we can actually influence the color of that. Let's say we want it to be more of that yellow. So I'm going to take and bring that into the yellow here. And that's probably a little bit on the bright side. So I'm gonna take it down just a little bit in the intensity. And of course we can also change the color here in how much light is being emitted, right? Part of the intensity of the light and what the color is. A collectible just sitting there isn't gonna look very great. So what I wanna do is I wanna add some animation to this, okay? So I'm gonna add an animation to my collectible. And the way I'm gonna do that is with my animation tab. So if you don't have this open, you can go to Window and Animation. So here's Animation and Animator. So we don't have an animation applied to our collectible just yet. So let's go ahead and do that. And I'm gonna save this into my animation folder. We'll call this collectible item. And now we have the animation timeline set up. So let's go ahead and I wanna take the sample rate or the frame rate down from 60 frames a second to 12 frames a second. We're gonna hit record. And then over a second's period of time. So let's go ahead and rotate this 360 degrees on the y-axis. So we wanna rotate around the y. So we're gonna go ahead and go 360 degrees. And I can tell you that a second is probably gonna be a little on the fast side. Yep, that's a little fast. So let's go ahead and slow that down. Maybe 2 seconds. Even that's a little fast. Let's take that to 4 seconds maybe. Yeah, and I think that actually works pretty good. Now, one of the problems that we're having is that it kind of starts slow, goes fast, and then ends slow. So it has some easing to it. And what I want to do is I want this to just I want it to appear like it's a continuous animation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select these keyframes. And then within those, or even on those, if I right click, you can see that I've got an option for both tangents and what type of weighting I want to apply to it. So in this case, I'm going to have it be a linear type easy. So I've got that linear, and now when it gets to the end, it will just seem like a continuous loop. So let's go ahead and give that a try real quick. And it should just look like it's continually rotating nonstop. There we go. So that looks pretty good. Now the other thing, as opposed to just having it just sit there and rotating, maybe we have it go up slightly, up and down. So let's do this. Let's say about 2 seconds in, I'm gonna lower it just a little bit. Again, we're still in record mode. So anything I do to this cube, it's going to record that. So let's go ahead and just lower it a little bit. And then we need to go back to the initial keyframe. So when I added a keyframe here in the middle, it also added a keyframe to the beginning of that timeline. So I'm gonna just select that first keyframe, go to the end of the timeline and paste. And I'm gonna do the same thing where I want this to just be a nice continuous linear animation. So we're gonna go both tangents and we'll do linear, okay? So we'll see what that looks like. Yeah, so it's kind of lowering down just a little bit and raising up and then lowering down. So it gives it just a little more of a dynamic feel. Cool, so I think that works pretty good. So I think we're done with the animation. Now, again, it's not super exciting, so there's more that we can do to this. So let's go ahead and inside of our collectible, I'm gonna add a particle effect. So let's go to Effects, Particle System, and we can actually just use the default particles because I think those get us pretty far. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna call this Particles Up, okay? So I'm gonna actually have 2 sets of particle systems. So one I'm gonna have kind of emit all the way around, and then one that's gonna go straight up. All right, so this is gonna be the one that's gonna go straight up. So what I'm gonna do is I need to rotate this. And the particle system is a 3D game object. So whenever you add a particle system, no matter if it's 2D or 3D, it's actually a 3D system. And it's just how the camera sees it. But in this case, we want this to look like it's going up. And by default, it's going back in the Z-axis. So let's go ahead and do a rotation on the X-axis because I want it to rotate up. In this case, I'm going to do a negative 90 degrees. So now it's rotating up. And if we look at the shape, you can see that the shape is in a cone. So if we kind of zoom out just a little bit, you see it in this cone shape, but I want it to go kind of straight up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the angle. So if I can change the angle, you can see that now it becomes more of a cylinder, and so the particles go straight up versus kind of going out. If I wanted them to go more out, I could do that as well. And then the radius, I'm going to take that down as well. So you can see here is the radius, which is at the very bottom. I'm going to take that down too to have it be just the size of the cube. Okay, so we've got that looking pretty good, I think. That might be just a little bit too small. Something like that I think works pretty good. All right, the next thing I need to do is to kind of work with these particles because they're a little bit on the big side and they're going really, really far up in the sky, which we don't want. So we do want looping turned on. We also want to make sure that pre-warm is turned on so that these particles, when the game plays, are already going to be there versus generating from the cube and moving up. They're just already in space. So what we want to do is to first change the lifetime. So I'm going to change the lifetime, and I love random between two constants. So it makes it a little more random. So let's just do a lifetime, and this is how long the particle lasts on screen. Have that be from maybe 0.2 to maybe 0.8. And I think those are still moving just a little bit fast, so we're going to go into the speed next. So again, random between two constants. Let's maybe take this from 1 to 2. Yeah, and I think that's not too bad. Again, the start size, let's take that to random between two constants as well. So I think these particles need to be way smaller. So let's go maybe 0.1 to 0.5. Yeah, I think that's not too bad actually. All right, so let's go with start color. And again, I can just change this to be, one color. So maybe on that yellow side or orangey side. But a better yet is to make it a random between two colors, just like random between two constants. So from a yellow side to maybe on the little more red side. So it gives it just a little more of a dynamic feel, maybe more in the orange there. I'll go a little bit brighter yellow. Cool, I think that works pretty good. And then the emission, this is how many of those particles are being emitted over a 1 second period of time. So currently over a 1 second period of time, there are 10 particles that are being created. So if we want there to be more, we can just increase this number. We'll say maybe 50. Yeah, so I think that actually gets us pretty far here with this collectible. The next thing I want to do is to go ahead and just add another particle system. So as opposed to starting over, let's just go ahead and just start with this and duplicate it. And then I'm also going to put it on the inside of the other particle system. And the reason for doing that is that both particle systems play at the same time versus seeing what one looks like versus the other. And we'll call this, instead of particles up, we'll go particles circle. And we want these to kind of emit all the way around. And so what we're going to do is to change the shape here from a cone to be a sphere. Okay, so they emit all the way around. But I want these to be a little more on the subtle side. So what I'm going to do is to first take the transparency of these colors down. And then the other thing is I don't want the particles to go the lifetime of the particle and then just disappear. I want them to kind of fade out over time. So the way I'm going to do that is to have a color over lifetime. So color over lifetime right here, select that, open it up. And then what I'm going to do is all I really need to do is just change the alpha of this from 100%, which is 255, down to 0. Okay, so they're going to kind of fade out as they're created. I think these particles do go out just a little bit too far. And so what I want to do is just a couple of ways I can affect that. I can either change the speed, change the lifetime, or I can also change the shape and the scale of the radius here. So let's go ahead and take the radius down, which will affect it a little bit. And then let's maybe go ahead and change the start speed too. Let's change that down from 1 to 2 to maybe 0.2 to 1. And they're gonna be a little more subtle that way, which I think works out pretty good. The other thing, I want to go back to the first set, and I want those kind of fade out as well. So let's select those. And again, same thing, color over lifetime. Open that up and change the alpha value down to 0. Yeah, I think that's looking actually pretty good. So let's go ahead and just play this real quick so we can see what that looks like. So here we've got this rotating up and down. We've got particles kind of emitting all the way around it and particles moving up. So it lets you know that there's something significant about this particular game object. So let's do one more thing here real quick. I'm gonna go ahead and just take my directional light, take the intensity of it down so it's more like it's nighttime. Yeah, that's actually looking pretty good. So let's go ahead and just add something else to it, just to give it a little more oomph. And I want there to be a little bit of more of a glow on the ground. So there's a couple different ways I can do that. But the easiest way, I think, is to just add a light to it. So I'm going to go ahead and just add a point light to it. And a point light is a light that emits all the way around as if it's a globe. And then a spotlight as if it's, directing down. So we can apply this light 2 different ways. But I think I'm going to go ahead and just add a point light. So I want to take the size of this light down a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and go with range, scale the range of that down, and you can see where that light is influencing the ground right here. And I'm going to take the intensity of it up just a little bit. Something around 5, I think, would work pretty good. And then we're going to go back into the animation. Because this is inside of our collectible, we can animate it. So let's go ahead and turn our recording on in our animation. And then what I'm going to do is right here is where it's lower to the ground. I want to increase the intensity of that light so that we get a brighter look for that light. So let's go with our point light. We're going to increase the intensity here. So as it gets closer to the ground, it's getting a little more intense. And then as it moves away from the ground, it gets a little less intense. So let's go ahead and go on the very first frame, change the intensity down to maybe 3. And then of course I want that to be the same on the end. So I could either copy and paste that keyframe, or I can just go back and just change the intensity here. Okay, so let's give this a test real quick to see what that looks like. Let's go ahead and hit stop right here and give it a play. Yeah. So that's looking pretty good. And all we've done is just some really, really simple little techniques to make this thing animate. And again, this is something that you can use for both 2D games and 3D games. And of course, you're going to want to add a collider to it. Again, if it's a 2D game, you're going to want to add a 2D collider. If it's a 3D game, you're going to want to add a 3D collider. So you can apply whatever collider works best for your game. This technique is going to work for both games, and it's going to look really good. Hey, I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Again, this is a collectible that you can create, and you can use this for both 2D and 3D games. And again, don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and that little bell icon down there so you know when the next tutorial is available. Until next time, peace.